Strikes. Strikes, 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 strikes. Probably the single piece of Destiny 2 content I and many other players have done the most out of everything in the entire game. And through my time playing them, I've noted that some are considerably better than others. This is based on a variety of different factors, and in this video I've compiled all these factors in order to answer the singular question: which strike is objectively the worst? And maybe best, I haven't really decided on that one yet. Now, my initial thoughts on this subject were my community's thoughts, proven by a poll or a community post of some kind. Yeah, that's right, statistics. But since I don't really have a very large amount of people that watch my new videos currently, it's not a very large sample size to go off of, which means I had to resort to scouring the internet for my information. What I found was useful but inconclusive to say the least, meaning I'm just going to have to play all the strikes in the game to do my own research and rate them all one by one. I think I've really underestimated the amount of time this video is going to take. If I haven't uploaded in weeks, this is why. So the first strike I went for was a classic, Lake of Shadows. I always love it when I get this strike in the playlist because it's probably the quickest strike in the game, as well as being one of the easier ones. The mechanics aren't very difficult, making runs with randoms a whole lot less stressful than some of the other strikes. The only place where this doesn't apply is the bridge section, and the exploding taken things that knock you off the edge. I think absolutely everyone has been revived by a teammate at some point, just to be booped off the map instantly, looking like an absolute joke of a teammate. No? Just me? Another element of this strike is that there's absolutely nothing against speedrunning through it and clearing the boss in a matter of minutes. I can't really tell if this is a good thing or bad thing, so you decide. So, for the rating of this strike, I will give it 4 out of 5 rice cakes. Yes, I'm using the rice cakes from Shadowkeep to rate strikes in Beyond Light, mainly because I couldn't think of anything else to rate them with, because stars are boring. Next strike, Arms Dealer. Is it just me, or does this strike seem to come up a lot in the playlist? Either way, this strike has
Cabal on the field,
and all my homies hate Cabal. The main storyline of this strike is that your fire team is chasing some weapons trader, an arms dealer, you could say, through a ship and eventually hunting him down and defeating him. Pretty standard stuff for a D2 strike. And thus the problem has revealed itself. On top of the strike being primarily Cabal, it's also just a very cookie cutter strike. The most interesting thing I can think of is carrying the ball and depositing it. I guess this is what you can expect from a strike that is supposed to introduce new players to the game, but that still doesn't help its case in terms of this video. So, with that being said, this strike will be getting 2 rice cakes, and not any higher. It's not the worst strike in the game, it's just a bit dull. And there's Cabal. All my homies hate Cabal. Have I said that already? Moving swiftly on from that, I'll be talking about one of the 2 newest strikes in the game, the Disgraced. Now, this strike is the only strike currently in the Cosmodrome location, and I kind of have mixed feelings about it. My main dislike about the strike is the boss. It has so much health. I will quite often use all my heavy ammo on it, and it will still only be at 3/4 of its health. However, if we ignore the boss, it's actually a pretty solid strike. You've got your Vandals, you've got your Ogres, you've got your Shriekers, you've got whatever this is. The fact that Disgraced is so diverse means I quite often find myself completing bounties in it. The only downside, of course, other than the boss, is that there's quite a bit of dead space in between areas. Walking from one area to the next, hacking stuff, that sort of thing. Pretty decent strike, but in my opinion it's kind of held back by the frustrating boss at the end, which is why I'm rating this one 3 what can only be assumed to be delicious rice cakes. Inverted Spire is the next strike to be rated, and this one is pretty interesting. It features both Cabal and Vex enemy types, meaning points are already awarded for being a good one for bounties. But the main reason why this strike is good is because of all the cool stuff that you can do within it. You can pull out your Sparrow as you go through one of the launchers. You can skip the entire middle part of the strike using some rather strange physics systems. You can drive a tank off of a cliff. As far as intended mechanics go, it's not too bad either. There actually seems to be some really nice sections. For example, the massive battlefield that you go across with Vex and Cabal fighting, that section is really cool in my opinion. The only real downsides that I can think of are that there is Cabal, and that there doesn't really seem to be the most enemies going through, so bounties might take a little longer. Overall, good strike. Solid 4 out of 5 rice cakes. I wish I could say the same for the next strike. Yeah, it's the Corrupted. Now I have a lot of stuff to say about this strike. Firstly, the mechanic with the ball throwing. You might be thinking, what ball throwing mechanic? That's my point. The balls that you pick up and throw in the elevator section and at the boss section aren't meant to be thrown straight at the shields, contrary to popular belief. You need to pass them to a teammate and it will take down the shield in one hit. Problem being, if your teammates don't understand the mechanic, throwing them a ball to throw at the shields can often lead to them missing or them throwing it off the side. Yes, one of my teammates has done that before. Luckily, it seems like recently the balls have been doing full damage to the shields without throwing it to a teammate. Is it a bug? Is it intended? Who knows at this point? The second issue is in the room where you drop down to the portal. There are these taken orb things which have more orbs orbiting them, and when you drop down it's completely pot luck as to whether or not you'll get hit. This, on top of the fact that you can't really see the bottom area, makes the room just a complete leap of faith. You could get it first try, or it could take 20. A third problem is the random bits of rock that hit you as you're jumping between platforms, specifically in the boss section. You could be just about to make a jump, and a boulder can hit you and send you flying into the abyss. Fourth argument, it's just long. Could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, depending on opinion. For this strike, I can quite confidently give it a 1 out of 5 score and avoid all the backlash in the process. But hey, at least the environment is cool, right? Next up is Inside Terminus, another Cabal strike on Nessus. Despite being a bit broken from Beyond Light's new engine, I don't really mind this strike, aside from the boss. The boss is completely awful. I specifically like the bit with the balls to open up the door. It makes the strike seem a lot less linear and actually makes the player do something semi-interesting. The strike is also pretty short, which to me personally is definitely a positive. The main downside to this strike, as mentioned earlier, is the boss. The boss is shielded until you capture some plates, which is relatively normal as far as strike bosses go, but it's still a bit frustrating nonetheless. That and the fact that the boss can launch you into the air. That's also pretty annoying. 3 out of 5 rice cakes. Next, finishing up the Nessus strikes, Exodus Crash. Now, from my research, it seems like this strike is hated by many a person on Reddit, and upon playing it with those opinions in mind, I can see why. 2 words, the boss. Picture this, a boss that is completely invisible, spawns loads of electric shanks, and has numerous holes in the floor that you can accidentally fall down. The worst part, the boss can be invisible for a completely random amount of time. It could be a few seconds, or it could be a whole hour. Well, maybe not that much, but you get the point. The only thing this strike has going for it is the pikes at the start that you can bring all the way to the end if you know how. For the average player though, this doesn't really seem like anything too great. I feel like I would be letting down the community, or at least the Reddit community, if I didn't give this strike 1 rice cake. It's bad simply because of the boss. Not really too much else to say. Start off with the Tangled Shore strikes, we have the Warden of Nothing. I want to like this strike, but after the engine changes, the game just makes that pretty hard. Firstly, when you go into the mines encounter, the trapdoor can just close on you. It usually takes a couple of seconds for you to phase through it, and when you do, it can just kill you sometimes. Secondly, when going up or down one of the pipes, you can just randomly die. I got a clip of this when I was recording gameplay, and it's just too perfect not to include. Both me and one of my teammates died when going into the boss room. This did happen before Beyond Light, but to a much lesser extent. Aside from that though, I quite like the strike. The environment, the storyline, the iconic voice lines are all really good. I like the boss as well, when your teammates don't shred it instantly, that is. The only other thing I want to talk about with this strike is those stupid trains. They are so unpredictable and can hit you in one hit and kill you in most cases. Honestly, harder than legit Riven. Not that I've ever done legit Riven, because your boy's never done Last Wish. That being said though, in a way I do quite like the trains. They lead to some rather funny moments. For this strike, 3 rice cakes. If the bugs were fixed, maybe I would rate it higher. After that, another Tangled Shore strike, Broodhold. It's alright. I like the mechanic with the worms, but the textures of the destructible walls, well, let's just say they could use some work. The boss spawns at regular places throughout the mission, meaning most of my heavy ammo is usually wasted by the time the boss fight actually happens. This happened to me in the gameplay you're seeing. Fortunately, the strike does have a pretty decent length and layout, so I'm willing to overlook the ammo issue, at least in terms of this video. The boss is also relatively painless, which is not usually the norm for strike bosses. Not really too much else to say about this strike, aside for a generous rating of 3 rice cakes. Now, finishing off the Tangled Shore strikes, we have another pretty awful strike according to the internet, Hollowed Lair. I might have some people disagree, but I personally quite like this strike. It's not the greatest or anything, but fighting Scorn instead of the usual enemies does give the strike a pretty unique feel. One thing I do agree on though, is the boss. I think that most people can universally agree that the boss is very bad. You never know when it will go immune, so you could just pop a super to waste it because the boss is immune. This strike also seems to be a bit buggy when it comes to bounties, especially in the boss room. The Scorn don't always give you progress, which I find a bit strange. That being said though, it's the only strike that you can get Scorn kills in, making it pretty useful. Additionally, and I haven't really talked about this with any other strike, the strike weapon for the Nightfall is pretty good when it comes to PvP. That is when I'm not using it, although it is like kinda a bit sunset. Overall, all my ratings seem to start with overall, I'm realizing, but overall I'll give this strike 2 rice cakes. Only because the majority of people dislike it, otherwise I'd probably give it 3. After all, this video is on objectively the worst strikes, and not just my opinions. Moving on to the penultimate strike in Destiny 2, the Scarlet Keep. This strike is a hive strike based on the moon, and has no real downsides that I can think of, apart from it being the longest strike in the game. Specifically, I really like the elevator sequence near the end, in direct contrast to the elevator encounter in the Corrupted. I like that there are acolytes in the little rooms because it gives you something to shoot at while you wait for the elevator, reducing the amount of dead space in between encounters, an issue many other strikes suffer from. Wow, that was a long sentence, why did I include that in my script? Boss fight isn't half bad either. It has a simple mechanic where you damage the boss, kill some enemies, and then damage the boss again. The rest of the strike could be better, but overall I like this strike, so I'll give it 4 out of 5 rice cakes. And the rice cakes actually make sense for this one, because it's from Shadowkeep. And last, and probably not least, we have Glassway. This strike is currently the only strike on Europa, and is also the only strike that requires Beyond Light to play. It's also one of the only 2 strikes in the game that feature a Vex boss, meaning it's pretty handy for bounties if you own Beyond Light. I don't really have any issues with this strike, to be completely honest. I like the section where you drain the room full of radiolarian fluid, I like the boss fight, I like the strike in general. The only real issue is that it's pretty long, although that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I will admit though, the Nightfall sometimes is terrible. There are quite a few Vandals. Now you might be thinking, so many Vandals? Is that an error in the script? No, it's not an error. Vandals in the Nightfall drop blinding mines that explode. As opposed to mines that don't explode, of course. And if you've ever been caught in one of these mines, you know that it's very painful and very awkward. Anyways, I'll give this strike a good 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, rice cakes. So with that wraps up all the strikes, but which is objectively the worst? Well, if we take a look at the lowest rated strikes, we can see that the contenders are Arms Dealer, Exodus Crash, Corrupted, and Hollowed Lair. Now the 2 that have 1 rice cake are Corrupted and Exodus Crash. And as much as I hate Arms Dealer, and as much as Reddit hates Exodus Crash, I've got to say that the absolute worst strike in the game is the Corrupted. Now let's be honest, you probably saw this coming, not only because it's in the thumbnail, but also because it was very heavily foreshadowed at the start of the video. I've noted that some are considerably better than others. To reiterate though, the reasons why I believe this strike to be the objectively worst one are the following. The bugged/changed ball throwing mechanic, the taken orb room, the length, and some of the other environmental hazards. Of course, if you think a different strike is worse, by all means leave your opinion in the comments. I'm actually genuinely curious as to what you guys think. I do read all of them, by the way. I'm still a very small channel by YouTube standards. Now for the best strike. There's a reason I didn't rate any of these strikes 5 out of 5. You see, there is just no perfect strike. You can have favourites, sure, but at the end of the day, some people are going to like different strikes than others. That being said though, the strikes that I rated for rice cakes for being objectively decent strikes are as follows. Lake of Shadows, Inverted Spire, Scarlet Keep, and Glassway. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Saying it took a ridiculously long time would definitely be an understatement, but hey, at least I have like 2 hours worth of Strikes gameplay. That's kind of nice. If you did enjoy though, and you want to see more, consider subscribing. I'm probably going to do more of this kind of stuff, because this one was really fun to make. But anyways, that's been it from me. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.